In this video I'll show you how to get the email addresses for your emails from a database. The agenda is this. First I'll introduce you to the email finishing definition, which is actually the way that most of our customers emailing with InterForm. For the outgoing email we need a key to look up in a database. We need perhaps some variables from the spool file to introduce a more dynamic text or PDF file name. You can have different text versions to present the email in different languages depending on the customer's language. The original spool file can be broken up into several emails, and we're doing that by selecting a specific area in the spool file. When that changes, we'll create new emails. We need to define, of course, the email address of the sender. We need here, in order to get the email address, we need to build up a small program, and I'll show you how to do that. Finally, we need to put it into production, so I'll show you how to put this procedure into AutoForm's control and what the individual parts are. So if we take a look at InterForm400, then what we would probably first do is to look into the finishing definition. And the finishing definition is a dynamic way of creating your emails. So I'm just selecting first option 5, AutoForm's control, for finishing definitions, and edit my existing email definition. So with this email finishing definition, you can quite dynamically build up your outgoing email. So it means that we can take some identification of the receiver in the spool file. That will probably be a customer number. We can use that, call a user program which should retrieve the email address or email addresses and return not only that, but the text version, like a template for the emails that is going out. We need to go through some steps here to define our finishing definition. So first we need to go into option 1 and tell InterForm we are going to find the email address through a user program. The user program will need one or more keys from the spool file. So we have here a customer number, which is defined as a 4-digit number. So what I'm using here for this example is the demo spool file from InterForm, and we have that right here in Graphical Designer. So my intention is to use this 4-digit number for looking up the receiver. So each time we find a new customer number, we will need to call a program which is responsible for finding out who is the receiver. I will return to this program later. We have through the years made more and more advanced programs with more parameters, so we can include more information going back and forth. So this is just a specification of what kind of program we want to call. Secondly, we can define one or more variables if we want to present the PDF file or the text in a more dynamic way. So we define here the 4-digit number from the spool file. We want to use the contact person from the spool file and also the company name here. So we initially just define the length of those variables, and later we will tell InterForm exactly where they are positioned in the spool file. Next, the PDF file that we are attaching to the outgoing email, which is the result of the merge between the spool file and an overlay or an overlay selector. So in this case we want to use the variable as a part of that file name. Next, option 5, that's where we define the text that we are going to use as the contents of that email. And you can have multiple text versions, for instance in different languages or different contents. In this case I'm just using one single text version and addressing the receiver in English. So this is for my internal use. This will actually be the subject of the email. Here we have how the email is going to look. So I'm encapsulating this in some HTML commands. And here again we can use variables not only in the subject but also in the contents. We can even at this point override the previous name of the PDF file, but here I keep that name that I defined before. So we keep this text version in mind because that's very important later on when we make our program. Next option here, option 6, definition of recipient ID. That's where we define the level breaks when we want a new email. So you could have multiple sequence numbers here if you had some text that were fluent, so your variables and your keys should be taken in different positions. In this case, it's all placed in fixed lines and positions, so we only need one single sequence number. And that's why we keep the page selection criteria here blank. So what we have here in the bottom is the information that we're going to use as the level break. So when this changes, then you will get a new email. For this demo, I've chosen to use the line and positions of where the key is placed, and that's quite normal. That is what you would normally do. So these are the lines and position here. So you can see the lines and position in the lower right corner of the designer here. So that's is what I've selected here. When I hit enter, InterForm will now remember what keys I've defined and what variables, and for those you are asked, where are they actually placed. So it's only the starting position as we previously defined the length, and of course the line where it's found. Next thing, the sender. We're going to send out emails, so who should be registered at the sender? The sender can be either a fixed one, or you can use a table here in InterForm. Depending on who owns the spool file, then you can look up in that table. But here we're going with a simple fixed sender. So that actually concludes the email finishing definition, which is step 1 of this process. But we did previously define a reference to a program, so that program should of course also be created. Let me first show you the demo source that is delivered with InterForm. So here in InterForm you have this demo source file with members with examples of each and every program that you can call from InterForm, and here all the mail exit versions are listed here. Of course, starting with mail exit, and the final digits is the parameter list version. We're using this mail exit source as the basis of our program. So what I've done is that I copied this onto my own source file outside the APF 3812 library. So it's very important to place your own objects outside that library. So if I move on to my own source, I have simply reused the standard program, and what I've introduced here in the bottom are actually these lines. So the program needs to return the text version that we want to use in the email finishing definition. It's very important to remember this. So this GB is set because we have this text version. So this must be the same that I return from my program. Next thing is that I need to return the email address that I want to use depending on the key found in my spool file. So the keys here can be 1004. Let me just move to the next page. 1001 and 1003. So you can cover some of them and then let InterForm handle the situation where some of the pages aren't selected for emailing. When your program doesn't return an email address, then InterForm will assume that you probably want to print it instead, because you simply don't have an email address. So the final thing missing here is that we need to add the process, or automate the process, in AutoForms control. So if I move back here, I've prepared a little demo setup here in AutoForms control. With the original demo spool file from InterForm, which you can print out from the service menu, we'll call our email finishing definition. So it will be called if these requirements fits with the spool file. So it must be form type this, and the spool file must be named print. Hitting enter. So we're calling our finishing definition, and those pages that we are going to email will go through a second step. Well, the first step here is that we will identify the emails that we're going to create, and then we'll create one spool file for each outgoing email, and I will show you later how they look. So these spool files will be created on the same output queue with this asterisk input, so they will be created by this line, arrive on the same output queue, and the idea is that they should trigger the P function, which will actually send out those emails. So that's how the procedure is. When I hit enter, we are asked for those pages that where no email address could be found, what should we do with those? So in this case, I'm moving them on to the same output queue with a form type of print. So I could have here a function 1 to merge those pages with an overlay or an overlay selector and print them out on a printer and put them manually into envelopes. When you set up this process, you must take care that you're not creating a loop, so that the email finishing definition is triggered by this new spool files that this one is creating. So it's creating these two types of spool files. So that's why you need to make sure that these attributes is not fitting the new form type. So if you specify the form type here, then you're quite sure it won't happen. So the new email spool file will trigger this line 2, a P function. Let me show you here with F23, P send PDF email. So it will do a merge. So first of all, we need to have the condition for this function, and then we're doing a merge with the demo overlay of InterForm, and that's more or less it. And the final step here is that it's a very good idea to do something with the spool files that we have created, and also the original spool file. So here I would suggest that you either hold, delete, or move these spool files, so you signal to your users that InterForm has taken care of this incoming spool file. The final thing missing here is to look into the process. So let me just verify. Well, currently there are no spool files, so we create a spool file here. Moving back to the main menu, option 12 service functions, and option 1 create demo spool entry. So when I hit enter, we have created this spool file. Going into AutoForms control, option 1, and if we do option 12 here, then we can see that this spool file is the original spool file, which triggered the email finishing definition, and that PRS print spool file is the recipe for the outgoing email. So if you look into the contents, you can see that we are going to send out to this email address with this subject, and where you can see the variables have now been substituted with the contact person and the company name. Also here you have the key used, and here you have the PDF file that we're going to attach to the outgoing email. So these two will trigger the P function, or have triggered the P function already, and this non-mail with the form type of print was simply just held. For this example, the receiver email addresses are non-existing, so the outgoing emails won't go anywhere. But we can look at the emails through the mail log. So if we go into option 80 and 40 and 5, and then we can open one of these emails to see how they would actually look. So you have exactly like the recipe mentioned this, and the attachment is the result of the merge between the overlay and the pages selected for 1003. So you can see this is a single page PDF file. Yeah, that concludes this introduction to the email finishing definition. If you want additional details, I suggest you refer to the InterForm 400 manual or your local InterForm 400 support.